Hi, everybody. Good morning in some cases, good afternoon in others. The beauty of being here, all connected, defying time zone differences. In any case, thank you all for being here with us on a Sunday. And moreover, this Sunday, that's so special and meaningful for us here at Rainforest Partnership. I am Veronica Rebollo, World Rainforest Day Coordinator, or should I say one of them, because World Rainforest Day is only possible thanks to the collaboration of not only Rainforest Partnership team members, which you may see among the audience, but also thanks to a wide network of partners, collaborators, experts from around the globe. And I'm one of the people also behind Rainforest Ambitions, which is the global summit that we are launching today for the very first time to extend World Rainforest Day celebrations throughout 3 consecutive days. And we are doing so to celebrate and explore the complexity of rainforest restoration and conservation, because conservation, if I may use this word, it's a very complex topic, extremely complex. And there are many ways to understand conservation and many ways to do conservation as well. And it's worth mentioning that here we are referring to a conservation that it's fair, it's socially inclusive, it's effective and long-lasting. One aimed at protecting rainforests, yes, but also all the living and non-living things they represent. May they be human, non-human, vegetal, mineral, and the interconnection in between them. All this mix that we call nature, including us. And this is why we have pulled out a program that would bring together the experiences, knowledges, and perspectives of peoples, collectives, organizations, individuals who one way or another are connected to the protection of our rainforests, that may be using different means to do so. Research and academia, the policy, business sector. Yes, we all know that, but let's not forget that the spectrum is wider than that. And one can do conservation nowadays in many ways, and as time passes, the options multiply, right? One can do conservation from behind the camera, from the classroom as teacher or a student, from the supermarket, from your own wallet, deciding what to buy or what not to buy, right? So all these fronts are valid and meaningful and ideally should be aligned. And this is what we want to reflect with Rainforest Ambitions. So we really hope you enjoyed the program as much as we enjoyed putting it together, and that you will join us in celebrating World Rainforest Day this year and in the years to come. Now, in this plenary, we are so honored to have 3 powerful women that have committed their lives and careers from an early age to the protection of our environment, becoming a source of inspiration for many others and achieving remarkable milestones. But before I get into presentations, into introductions, before getting into introductions and dialogue and giving the floor to our session moderator, Niyanta Spellman, who is the CEO of Rainforest Partnership as well, I would like to remind the audience of a few technicalities. First of all, the session will be recorded and will be available on demand for you to revisit or use in www.worldrainforestday.org. Also, you may notice that you're muted, but we welcome you to communicate through the chat as you are doing so far. Let us know who you are, where you're calling from, which organization you're representing, and so on. Use that space to connect with each other and to share contact details if you consider so. And use the Q&A chat for specific questions to our panelists. We will have some time at the end to revisit them and answer some of them live, either written or orally. So yeah, please just type your questions there. And that said, I would like to wish you all a very inspiring session and would like to invite Niyanta to take over the floor. So Niyanta, the floor is yours.
Hello and welcome everybody. It is just wonderful on this 5th World Rainforest Day to be here, to be with all of you and to be with Hindou, Oumarou, and Ibrahim and Bella Lack here to welcome you to World Rainforest Day. 5 years ago, when we started World Rainforest Day, it was actually in the shadow of the US pulling out of the Paris Agreement. 5 years on, as we are 2 days ahead of World Rainforest Day, we're looking at a very, very different place. Then, in the spirit of hope and to show the world that many of us in the US, many of us around the world were not going to be we were not going to be taken off track, that we were determined that we were going to stay the course. We planted that seed around that idea that the world could still come together, that we could still do what we needed to do for our one planet. And so as this 5th year, we celebrate and support these rainforests, these vital, vital ecosystems that are so essential for a vibrant, well-balanced planet. And we bring in Indigenous voices and we bring in a voice for nature. I invite you to be not just part of Rainforest Ambitions, but see what's happening around the world. The numbers of actions that are coming together, from school children to artists, to musicians, to government officials, to companies large and small, and most of them are not part of Rainforest Ambitions. Most of them are not even part of any of the efforts that we are doing or we know about. It's like the tip of the iceberg. Rainforest Ambitions and what we're doing is the tip of the iceberg, and what's happening around the world is mostly below, but it is no less important because it's basically holding up all the work we're doing together. And so with that, I want to invite two powerful voices. I want to invite Hindou Umaro Ibrahim, who is an incredible voice for Indigenous peoples, not just from Chad, where she's from, but for Indigenous peoples all over the world. And when she speaks, and I want somebody to write down who Hindou is, so you get to know who she is. But I invite you to watch her speech at the opening for the special ceremony for the Paris, at the Paris COP in at COP 21 in 2015. And you will see the power. And after Hindou and I've spoken, I'm going to invite Bella. But to get started, Hindou, here's also the format. So Hindou and I are going to talk, and then Bella and I are going to talk, and then the three of us are going to talk, and then we're going to invite the rest of you to come in. So Hindou, we spoke and we talked about how today, when we are, if we listen to the UN, if we listen to what we know, we're about 10 years away from what the UN says is the dual existential crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss. We're going to talk a little bit about what we know versus waiting for the scientists and multilateral bodies to tell us. But how do we engage and invite everybody? How do we move beyond the comfort zone? If we can start there with the conversation.
Thank you very much, Nyanta, and hi everyone. Really good Sunday. It's so great to have you even during the weekend. And I think where we start, it's like what we are doing. We cannot stay in our comfort zone, maybe working only from Monday to Friday. And this is what we start because we are working on Sunday. And this is not in the comfort zone, because Sunday is going to the church or getting rest or whatever. And we choose to work, protect the forest, protect the ecosystem, biodiversity, people's own need. And secondly is, if we wanted to get out from the comfort zone, we have to be an open mind and see how we can engage the peoples who do not know or who do not understand about what we are talking about when we say nature, when we say protect nature. Those who cannot understand what is the nature. Because as indigenous peoples, for us, nature is everything. Nature is our shelter. Nature is our food. Nature is our economy. It is our health. And we are part of nature as human beings. We are only one species among the rest of millions of species in the nature. And of course, we cannot get beyond rights beyond the trees or rights beyond the water or rights beyond even the insect. We should the same right and share those rights. So we should inform or tell those people who do not know what is the nature. I understand some concept if we are talking about the environment or we are talking about how we can protect forests or whatever. It is easy to talk with the convinced peoples because we already agree with it and we already know how we can do and how we can scale it up, and we talk to each other to scale it up. But how about those who are left? So this is the first thing we really should do. We should involve them and understand from them. I give you an examples of my own life, like how I did to get engaged with other peoples. You know, as indigenous peoples, we never accept we work with the private sector because private sectors are the one who is stealing our lands, who destroying our ecosystem, putting the chemicals, thinking always about the money, how to add $1 to another one. They do not think about how it can be sustained and protect the nature. So that's the reason we do not want to work with them. And then I say like, okay, let us see. If I attend one of the meetings of those who wanted to change, to go green, and what is going to do, what is going to work on it. So then I went to one meeting and I saw the people that they wanted to change because one reason, they do have children and they do have grandchildren, and they remember that the action that they're doing, it's not only impacting themselves, it's going to impact their children and their grandchildren, and they wanted to correct it. But they do not know how to do it, so they might again produce the same mistake. So that was one of the reasons I saw. Then I'm like, no, we need to engage people beyond the comfort zone. And then I get engaged with them. I'm like, you know what? You want to do a sustainability in your own business. You must firstly recognize and respect the rights of indigenous peoples. You must implement the free, pure, and informed consent. You must have a strategy of gender mainstreaming and gender inclusions, because you cannot achieve it if you do not have women in what you are doing. And you must stop also what you are harming the nature by creating a new safeguard. And those safeguards can be beyond you, even if you leave your job or you pass away or whatever, then your company can still doing a right things that cannot harm the people. So then you can shift through one place to another one. So this is the examples I left myself. That's why it is very important to see how we can go beyond our comfort zone and ask those people to be responsible and protect people and nature.
That's wonderful to hear, right? Because you had to go and do something in a sense nobody had done. When you went to the World Economic Forum that first year, you're the only Indigenous person. So now suddenly you are the voice and the face for Indigenous people everywhere. That's both a huge obligation and responsibility, but it's also the ability to have people see something that they're not used to seeing, right? And you look them in the eye, and it's much harder when you look somebody in the eye and get to know them by their name, have shared a meal or have had a conversation, to then go and ignore and say, I don't know. We talked about the value of Indigenous wisdom and knowledge and how science, we often wait for science to confirm that. But as you said, Indigenous people have been one with nature. We've known, you've talked about how you've known how to live with nature, what the solutions are. So I wanted us to talk a little bit about how how you get people to focus on both that, and how do we create that strong space for demanding the inclusion of Indigenous voices in the solutions?
Right. So this is really our world. So this new world, always thinking about, we wanted to confirm this before to agree. And then they wanted to confirm it because it's written somewhere, because they read it somewhere, or they watch it in the TVs or whatever. So this is also another way when we are looking for knowledge, and especially for a knowledge around nature. We cannot be limited just in the documentary or book or school. We must go beyond. And the beyond is the Indigenous people's traditional knowledge. Because those peoples who do not have even access to electricity or to water, who cannot just write a book, or who do not have a PhD or master's, they are the engineers of the nature. They are the PhD plus in so many skills someone can just have it. And I give you in concrete examples from my community. So when you come in church, you go to a nomadic pastoralist communities, there is no school, there is no hospitals, there is even no clean water to drink, because people is still drinking from the rivers, from the lake. But when you ask them, how do you do to cope with this changing climate? Because in church, we are already having 1.5 degrees Celsius. We already reached the Paris Agreement objectives, but people is still that just reviving, is still adapting and building the resilience, continuing the life. So then they say, well, we learn always from the nature. And that is how we grow up with it. We learn from the nature because we observe the nature. Imagine if you have only a dog or a cat at home. You know that when your cat or your dog is sick, and you know that how his behavior is changing. So imagine if you are living just in the nature and you are nomadic. So you must have the basic knowledge about the weather, if it's going to rain, if it's going to be cold, if it's going to be dry, because your life is related to it, because you do not depend from the end of the month salary to go to the supermarket, buy food. You depend from the rainfall to cultivate your crops and give it to your family to eat. You do not have fridge to save it. You have only like the sun to dry it up, to save it for the next 12 months before the other rain season comes. So all those traditional knowledge and wisdom that pass it from one generation to another one, we learn it from the nature because we observe the nature. And when we come to the science, of course, they say it is very important, but it is anecdotal. So we really need to confirm it. So just my questions to them, like, who are you to confirm the knowledge of my grandmother that's passed over thousands of years? Because your science started hundreds of years. So maybe my grandmother should confirm your science knowledge. What do you think about just explaining the book that you call it PhD, who have maybe 1,000 pages, and with all the life entire that she learned from the nature? So then at the end of the day, there is no need to confirm. There is need to see the way to combine the different knowledge system. What we want, we need action. We need action accelerated to reduce all what we are doing to the nature, what we are harming to the nature. So every knowledge is gone. I end by this. Indigenous peoples preserve 80% of the world biodiversity. This is not denied. And this is the scientists themselves who say it, maybe more from our own side that we are protecting. So when we protect that, that means we do have the knowledge. So we must have the place to sit in the tables, to take the decisions without any prejudices, to put our knowledge and science knowledge together to help climate and biodiversity.
Thank you so much, Hindou. This is the point of view, which is not just the point of view, it's the way of life. It is the path forward for how we can draw on solutions that people who've been close to nature, that have lived as part of nature, have developed and innately know. And how do we now bring it in to the normal day-to-day life? Because if we don't do that, then we are not using some of the best tools that we have today in dealing with something that is absolutely a crisis for humanity, for all of us. So before we go to a conversation, let me turn to Bella, because, you know, just as you are a wonderful voice for Indigenous people and nature, Bella is both a voice for nature, but youth, and she's a powerful young voice for nature. And if you want if you have any doubts, go watch the beautiful poem that Bella wrote and recites on a short film called A Message from Earth. And so Bella is from the UK. How about telling us very quickly both why you came about speaking for nature, and then what is your true vision for our future as a young person, as somebody who's speaking for so many around you?
Okay, firstly, thanks so much for having me. And I loved hearing Indu speak so much with such passion. Yeah, it was amazing to hear you. And I think for me, it began, you know, when I was 11 or 12, and I didn't have this ingrained love of nature in my family. But for some reason, I was sort of the anomaly. So I'd grown up being very passionate about the natural world, living on the outskirts of London, but still being fascinated even by the smallest things in my garden, by ants or the snails I saw. And then when I was about 11 or 12, suddenly I had this moment turning from someone who loved nature to someone who was terrified about what was happening to it. And I think it was because I watched this video about palm oil and the effects of palm oil on orangutans and deforestation. And then after that one moment, it sort of catalyzed my concern, and I began speaking to everyone about palm oil. I went into school and I gave a speech about how we must all give up palm oil, and I was telling everyone about this. And it was very, you know, focused, and I was very adamant that that was the solution to stopping deforestation. I thought it would be a year or two and I would end deforestation as a result of palm oil. Now, 6-7 years later, I realized, you know, environmentalism can't be that certain and direct. You have to have a much more holistic approach. And that's kind of why you asked about my vision for the future. And I think that's so important in the whole environmental movement, because right now we're talking about saving the world, but we have very little idea of where we want to go. We have lots of ideas of where we don't want to go. The IPCC sets out all these statistics about, you know, what's going to happen by 2050. We're going to have more plastic in the sea than fish. We're going to have, you know, it's going to be 2 degrees hotter. 60% of the Amazon will be gone, things like that. We know what could happen on that trajectory, but we very rarely envision the other path, the other trajectory. And that's one where our cities are cleaner, where children can actually play in the streets because there are fewer cars, where rainforests aren't being desecrated, but actually there's afforestation rather than deforestation. And I think for me, that's more important actually than hearing the alternative statistics, because as humans we need something to move towards, and I think having that vision of the future is so important. So often when I do things like this, I ask people to imagine you are in 2050 and we've all taken action, we've taken the right trajectory. What would the world look like for you inhabiting that year? And I think it could be something beautiful, and environmentalism doesn't have to be a sacrifice, you know. It can also be an incredible journey for us as a species, and this is a turning point. It has to be a turning point because we don't have any option anymore. We know that we're facing this crisis, and we know that the scale of the challenges we have to face is huge, but it's also a great opportunity for us to change.
So you and I spoke a little bit about the importance of narrative. And you sort of started talking about that already in terms of the vision. Tell me why that's important, why the word narrative is important, and how do we think about changing the narrative? Indu already talked about, you know, bringing in not just the value, but recognizing what Indigenous knowledge and wisdom is and how it's absolutely essential to incorporate that. What is the current narrative that you think, as somebody representing youth, as an ambassador for our planet and nature, that needs to change?
Well, narrative's a really funny word, isn't it? Because everyone sort of throws it around as a buzzword, saying we need a new narrative, but very few people sort of stop to think, well, what is the narrative that we have now? And the only way we can create to get rid of this new one, to get rid of the one we have, is to create a new one. And I think the narrative that we're telling ourselves, definitely the predominantly Western narrative, is one of consumption and growth. And during the pandemic, there were moments when people realized that that's not working, and that narrative is leading to destruction, because our destruction of nature is resulting in, destruction of ourselves, because our fate is so bound up with nature. And then as a result of that, there were many sort of there's a bit of a butterfly effect. There was lots of green movement around the world. Paris implemented lots of bike lanes during the pandemic, not just bike lanes, there were lots of things going on in France. Amsterdam adopted a circular model. And I think that is sort of a fragment of a new narrative, adopting a circular model and rejecting this linear one, because obviously we can't have this infinite growth on a finite planet. And so last year, we were speaking a bit about this last time I spoke to you, and last year I made a documentary, and the whole idea was to speak to people around the world who are creating this new narrative, who are on the front line, because actually we don't need to create new solutions. As Hindou showed, these solutions exist. It's about uplifting them and bringing these fragments together to create this story. So during the film, we met an economist who spoke about the circular economy. We met 2 farmers in France who are using permaculture, and in their farm, they're producing more food per hectare than any intensive agriculture in the world that uses pesticides, because of the diversity and because of their rejection of monocultures. We spoke to an activist who cleaned the most polluted beach in India, because he decided, and he helped to actually implement a ban on plastic in India, because he decided that current story they were telling themselves of throwing things away when they've been used isn't working. And he saw that firsthand on the beach outside his home, and he decided to reject that and change the story for himself and for his community. So lots of people are sort of starting these things around the world, and now it's about listening to those stories, stepping back in some cases stepping up, listening to those, uplifting them, and then creating this master narrative of humanity where we recognize that we're.
So what you've talked about, it's really, you're the generation that's coming up, becoming, Indu talked about this, you've talked about it. Right now, the current economic model, money reigns supreme often. But what is the role of youth? Your generation thinks very differently. You want something that's comprehensive, that is not just taking, trying to have one thing have sort of the economy or money be have primacy, that you want it to be a comprehensive view of what it means to have a healthy life, how nature plays a role, how Indigenous voices play a role, how youth play a role. So from, what is youth's role now? I think you've said it's not something for the future, it is now. How do you share with the folks? How do you think about it? How and why it cannot just be a passion for you that you talked about? You've had to study for exams, and so you're doing something that sort of, keeps you very much next to your computer studying for these exams, and then the next day or the next moment you're thinking about what's happening at the planetary scale and what's happening to our climate and our future.
Yeah, that's funny, because I think everyone involved in conservation has this other life as well, not just students. And environmentalism is going to be about people having to sort of make these sacrifices and take time to focus on the environment. And so in that regard, the role of youth isn't really any different to the role of anyone else. And everyone should have, as Indu said, everyone should have a role and a seat at the table. So it's sort of about, rather than giving youth and sort of constructing this new role for young people, we need to just diversify the table, make sure everyone has a say in what's happening. And the message, if you look at the message from Greta Thunberg, from scientists, from ecologists, it might be phrased differently, but it has the same root, and it's very much the same, which is unite behind the science, take action immediately because we're facing a crisis. We don't have time to wait. And we spoke about narrative before, and it's that narrative, it's phrased differently, but it's the same narrative, and we need everyone to get behind that.
So if you had a question for Hindou, what would that be? I want to sort of move to the three of us having a conversation. If you had to have a question for Hindou, what would it be? And Hindou, if you had a question for Bella, what would it be? I saw somebody asked a question. There are such parallels in what both of you are saying, right? And there's so much convergence around how we are seeing the patterns and what the path looks like if we want to change the narrative or the path we're on, or come to a place where I don't even want to think about 2050. I want to talk about 2030. So this is when somebody's 56, 2050, that's like some other future, right? For you, can you imagine, if we're going, if our march is to 2030, what is it that we want to do? How do we want to lead? How do we want to collaborate? How do we want to bring people together? What would your question be for Hindou? And Hindou, what would your question be for Bella?
I have a question. So when, I know Costa Rica, they lost lots of forest, and they got down to 20% forest cover or something across the whole country. And then they had this new prime minister came in, or president actually came in, and he spoke to the Teraba tribe, this indigenous tribe in Costa Rica. And from speaking to them and engaging with them, he then, within, I think it was 20 years, they increased forest cover to 53%, because he spoke to them, listened to that indigenous knowledge, and then was hugely successful in his approach to ecology where other past prime ministers hadn't been. And I think in a way that's what the whole environmental movement needs to do. So my question would be, as a Western activist who wants to be, when I say loud, I mean metaphorically loud as possible in amplifying this message, this environmental message, and spreading it as far as possible. How can I do that and be loud without, while still uplifting your message? What would you ask me to do, but in order to uplift your message as an Indigenous person?
Great. Firstly, thank you so much, Bella, for what you are doing. And I really love all what you said, and exactly that's what we need, actually. And yeah, coming to even your own examples, the president of Costa Rica, I don't know if I can say that he's a good friend of me with the wife also, because I have been in a panel with him, and I went to Costa Rica, and he remembered me, and he was just working when we had a pre-COP. He was working in the pre-COP with the wife. I was just like running there, and someone ran and stopped me. They said the president wanted to talk to him because he saw me from far. So I just come back, and then with the wife, we stopped that over all the peoples and we chat. So just to confirm what you are saying, not because he only talking to the indigenous peoples in his own country, he's talking to the indigenous peoples around the world. And then he remember the peoples, and he pay attention, and even imagine this example that he just stop with the wife, like, call, this is Hindou, I saw her, just like Hindou, come here and wait. And then the next day with the minister and other ministers, we went to visit the national park to see how they are conserving and how they are engaging indigenous communities. So there are a good examples that coming on. But as you people, especially the young people, young voices that in developed countries that raising up and then asking about all the climate environmental protections, how you can do to help us. Firstly, you can ask your government on them action, because you can do that, we cannot. In your countries, the democracy is more confirmed. Your voices can be more heard. And I hear what you said around the palm oil. If you, who are buying the palm oil, who are exploiting the palm oil from the company? They are all the companies coming from the developed countries. So if you can just tell them that, they have to stop deforestation, because all the commodities that are coming, they are not coming from nowhere. They are coming from indigenous land, and they do not know how they are exploiting, because I saw that EU is coming with a new law. Maybe UK will come with a new law around all the commodities, but it's not only the law or the paper that they're writing that can confirm. It is seeing in the ground how indigenous peoples are involved on the ground. You must ask them. How the free, prior, and informed consent are implemented, you might ask them. And then you can also ask those who are buying to pay attention from what they are buying. Maybe they can buy the commodities today, but it's going to destroy their own life for tomorrow, because if they destroy the indigenous land, that means they are destroying their own land. And you can also ask people to who they are voting, because if we hear or from Niamta said the 4 years that Donald Trump's have been in the office, what we win? We just the US lost like 4 years of the leadership around all the environmental issues. So who you vote for, it's really matter. So you can ask people to vote for the others who are respecting the laws, who are respecting the laws beyond their frontiers, who can respect the women's rights. I mean, the social, economic, and environment, it is not separate. It is all interlinked. And when you go to the ground, you know it. So that also can matter. Your voice cannot replace our voice, but your voice can even empower our voice and make your leaders to be responsible. A last example in your question, because I really love it. It is really very, very relevant to so many issues. So the last things that you can say, when your country is investing in bilateral or multilateral fund, so they must to see where are they investing this money. It is not charity. It is they are paying for what they did. So they must pay for the adaptation, for the loss and damage, for the resilience, to build the resilience of the developing countries. And that can help them also to be resilient. In the other hand, they must not invest in the bank that are destroying other life and not in the fossil fuel. So you really can do a lot in your voice without working in our voice, but by complementary. And I saw that in the question someone asked, how we can work together like this. I and you, we are doing a great TED Talk show to see how we can change the world. So we can do that, or we can do it in a different audience, or we can do it in the social medias, or like people can come and visit my community or other indigenous communities and see what is happening, and they can witness it by themselves and build an argument to go in. So I stop there, otherwise I will go on and on and on.
It's wonderful, right? Because there are so many of us that have the passion and care, and the more we bring our passions together and we together collaborate and amplify, we can be a powerful, unstoppable force that governments and companies cannot ignore, right? And so if you think about Gen Z, Generation Z, which goes to what, 25 or 26, they're going to be 40% of the consumers by 2026. That is incredible power in a world where corporations are chasing dollars. This is where what Hindou is talking about is so important. And so Bella, you, before we go and ask more questions to the audience, so you've been the youth director for Reserva Land Trust, and besides being an ambassador in youth ambassador in multiple other ways, tell us how youth can see an optimistic, hopeful future that they are charting the path for, as opposed to a very dystopian future, because that is not where we want to go. That is not we still have the ability to chart our own destiny, that the current trajectory does not have to be our destiny, as you talked about. What is that vision? So how do you bring youth about looking at what they can do using their powerful voices? And I've told you about our own Gen Z for the Trees, our own youth branch at Rainforest Partnership. And even in just this last week, because of World Rainforest Day, they've been collaborating, and there's already new collaborations happening. Yours is a generation. So would you like to share that? And perhaps you can talk to Hindou and say, Hindou, who are the youth in your community that we could partner with at the moment, right?
Oh, you already talk like one of the component of my question, how you can collaborate beyond only the youth that is speaking English, because even we know environment is focused on English, but nature have no limit or barriers in languages. Go ahead.
Bella, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question, and it's sort of about, like what we were speaking about earlier, diversifying the table. But I've worked with both groups of adults and youth, and actually when you're working with groups of young people, it sort of deconstructs those barriers automatically, I find. And I think young people have this ability to sort of see things very holistically and to empathize very much with animals that we're trying to protect and with the habitats that we're trying to protect. And at Reserva, definitely, I know Callie's on the call as well, who set up the Youth Council, and the Youth Council has young people from many, many different countries of different speaking languages, some who don't speak English. And those language barriers actually mean almost nothing in the communication between the different Youth Council members. And I think it becomes more of a challenge as people get older and they sort of see things a bit more myopically compared to how young people see things holistically, because they empathize so much with the animals and the habitats, as I said. So actually, I think just to subvert the question, maybe instead of how adults could get young people involved, it's more about how young people are trying to get adults involved, because I've seen this huge surge of youth movement. It's growing all the time, and I don't think it needs feeding or nurturing anymore. I think it's sort of like this trying to think of a metaphor, don't have one for that, but it is growing, and I think that's going to keep growing. So I would change the question to, what can young people do to engage adults?
That's a wonderful way of looking at it. And I think in some ways, Hindou already said, what are some of the things you can do to collaborate with Indigenous people, but also governments? And what I believe is that your generation has to lead, and it is time to ask the questions, not just ask, demand a very different way of being. So Hindou, you had talked about, when I asked you, what is your dream? And you had a dream. What is your dream? If you could today sort of say, overnight, you want to see your dream come true, share with us what that is. Paint that for us.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a dream, I can say that my dream could be the world where the trees, each tree of this planet, have the same right as human beings. Each insect or animals or whatever, each life have the same rights. We cannot say we are dominant and we can cut the trees because they cannot talk. We must think about how we can have a court where we cut the trees without this reason, and then this tree can also request his own right because we take it. Imagine when you kill a human being, there is a process of judging the person, imprisoning the person. And if there is harm that you kill someone, and then your judgment is also different. So there is a lot of reason that we must have a right for the nature. If I dream, I must take this indigenous wisdom to become really a reality. In each indigenous culture, that's what we have in common. From the 7 sociocultural regions, you can go from the glaciers of Arctic to the desert of all the North Africa. You can go to the savannas of the Sahel, to all the tropical forests, Congo Basin or Amazon. You can go to the islands of Pacific, to the mountain, to Himalaya. Indigenous peoples have one thing in common: respect the nature, living in harmony with the nature. We never talk about human rights as human beings without talking about environment rights. So my big dreams is we give the right to the nature to decide, and we also get the same right. Then maybe the solution are in our hand.
I love what you're saying. Bella, when you and I talked, you said something similar. We talked from the opposite perspective, talking about ecocide. You know, would we think differently if we viewed everything around us that's in nature differently? If we thought of it having value that it really truly does, if we acknowledged and understood how this mesh of everything, it's all one, it's all connected, it's all together. Our planet and everything on it, it's incredibly well connected, and things are out of balance when we think that us humans have dominion. And you know, to some extent, religion has played a role in how we've been told that, you know, man and woman have dominion over everything else. And we know from reality that is not the truth. And as important as religion is for all of us around the world, now, as you know, there is an amazing initiative, religious, the faith groups coming together for rainforest and for climate. Why? Because there is this strong recognition, something that Hindou would say that Indigenous peoples have always known. So how about you, Bella? How would you think about the role of this narrative, current narrative of dominion over nature of man, and the idea of what you talked about, ecocide? How do we change that thinking and that narrative?
So I think what we said earlier about the youthful ability to sort of empathize with animals and with different creatures, I think it's that youthful perspective which people need to adopt. Because if you look at adults who have roles in society often see nature through the lens of those roles. So maybe a CEO sees a forest as, you know, an opportunity to exploit as money, perhaps, for the timber, or to put a road through it, or a dam, or something like that. A young person, you know, sees a forest and they see the magic of it, and they experience it in all their senses, and they see an animal in the forest and they empathize with that animal, and they don't really, there are no animals or species or, you know, anything as a means to an end. It's just appreciating it for its inherent value. And I think that needs to change, and it's that shift in mindset which is going to be one of the most important things which we can do, because I think the biggest crises we face are actually the lack of imagination, it's the apathy, the lack of ability to empathize, and if we can change that, I think, you know, we're going to find this a lot easier, and that's the root of what we really need to do, changing that mindset. And regarding ecocide, I would agree that, you know, natural rights are one of the most important things we can do, because undoubtedly it's genocide what people are doing, what companies are doing, and CEOs cutting down thousands of hectares of rainforest, polluting the oceans. We're not destroying just the natural world, the natural world external from us, we're destroying ourselves as well, because we know our fate is bound up in nature. So it's about that recognition as well, that we're not exempt from biological laws, and ecocide and rights for nature aren't some sort of crazy hippie concept, they're necessary, and I think that has to happen as well.
it is, so just in our conversation, sometimes when we sit and talk, we think, oh my gosh, we see this, and it's up to us to chart that path, chart that dream, bring it together, basically really empower people around the world, right? That want to be empowered, give voice and platforms to those who already are like who you are, that don't have that ability because maybe they don't have English or French or whatever one of the prominent dominant languages. So these are some things we have to think about. But I love what you're talking about in how youth think about it, how if we could just connect people to their younger selves, we might just solve this. If I were to listen to you, Bella, that would be the thing that we could do. Here's the quick question. Did we have a question? How can we make this? Okay, here's the question. How can we make this World Rainforest Day just the beginning of long-term collective action and collaboration? We've heard some of that. If you had something very specific, would love to hear either from you, Hindou, or Bella. And as we are coming towards the end, I would also like both of you to think about putting ourselves right now that this is June 22nd, 2030. And I will flip that question. What has happened in these last 9 years? And today we're at June 22nd. Okay, we're at June 20th, 2030. And how have we collaborated and how have we created collective action? If each of you can talk about that, I think that would be wonderful.
Go ahead, Bella, go ahead.
Okay, just for the question, I'll just say, I think Hindou said earlier about, hang on, what was it? Turning this dialogue into an ongoing, I think Hindou said, I've completely lost my train of thought now. I can do that. Do you want to do your vision and then I'll answer the question?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
There's so much to say.
It's okay. It can come always. And I think that's also what we need to do, if complementing each other. So it is not like I will talk, I'm the best, or I will do that, I'm the best. This is the things who pull us back. So how we can do to continue these conversations, it is opening this space, having the peoples who are living, depending from those ecosystems to come and share the knowledge, share the views, having the peoples who are supporting and who are fighting in other hand, like my little sister here, Bella. I call you my little sister because we are all a human being. So we are all the same, depending from the nature, we are a species of the nature, and also come there and give her views of how she can do it. I think the conversation can be, it's not only like 22nd of June, it might be every day, a forest champions, a forest restoration, a ecosystem talks, because it's our daily life. We cannot stay without drinking water or eating a food or breathing air. So why we want to just to stop the conversation? We must converse this always. We must do that over the Zoom, in a family. We can do that in the world. We can discuss, even if you are working in economy or you are working in philosophy or in the hospitals, you have a linkages with the nature. You should talk about it. So this is really very important. And to come to your question, Nianta, so if we are already like plus 10 years, 22nd of June or 21st of June and 2030. So how will be the conversation if you ask how we did? I will love that to see, oh, at least we are not these generations who turn up the button of no reverse. And like saying we are so proud of us because the last 10 years, we make an incredible action. We restore the forest, we protect the ecosystem, We restore the species that are lost. We give the place, the voices to indigenous communities that taking the decision around all the ecosystem they are living in it. Then we can say, oh, at least we know how to live in harmony with the nature. Or at least in our supermarket, there is no product that's coming from deforestations. Or we can say, oh, in the Sahel, there's not people that dying of hunger because there is drought that's coming there, or there is extreme weather events. So our crops are there. And we can say, oh, we are passing our traditional knowledge because thanks to all the trees that we save, thanks to our rivers, thanks to our oceans, we can say, oh, we dive deep and we saw that the coral reef restored, and then we have the colorful and beautiful fish and all the species of the oceans who are back. And we can say, oh, our desert becoming a big space that we can learn from it. And we can say, okay, maybe from now, if we fly going to Mars or going to another planet, at least we are not destroying this other planet because we are protecting already this planet. So we are not looking for the plan B that we are exploring, and then rich can go there and we can choose, we can select. We are not selecting because we are equal. We are equal species, equal nature, equal everything. So I really will love that on 21st of June, 2030, Bella, you, I, all the participants here, we are having a conversation, celebrating the huge action that we did with our children, with our grandchildren, and saying, let us guys, we cannot just make commitment for 2050, but we make the commitment now, and we will take it and continue. So this is what I would love to have. And I'm sure that with Bella in this age, we will be sitting there, right?
And the three of us are going to come together and everybody else with us. What a beautiful way to see it. I don't know about anybody else, but I actually felt myself, my whole body was just rising and enveloped in and the vision that you were seeing. How about you, Bella? Did you feel that? Did you see that? Did you? Yeah. Are we going to create and chart our own reality?
I think we have to, and I think we are, and we've seen it happening as well. I mean, it's not only something predicted in the future, things have changed. I think it was maybe in the past 2 years, there's been a definite shift. And I think it's been driven by all the new movements speaking up and the unity of these voices, perhaps through social media, the sudden ability of everyone to communicate almost instantaneously, to share ideas and to unite behind this one message that we're pushing. And in response to the question, I finally found my train of thought. And I think, forests cover something like 6% of the planet. And most people, for example, in Reserva, lots of the young people in Reserva haven't been to a rainforest and may never step foot in a rainforest, but still care deeply about those areas and those habitats they're trying to protect. And I think that's something which is so, so important, that we really need to latch onto people recognizing the interconnectedness of nature. So in terms of, making Rainforest Day the beginning of long-term action, this isn't about just Rainforest Day or climate action or taking action on plastic pollution. There needs to be this much more holistic approach, recognizing the interconnectedness of all of it. And then also people taking a local approach to this global problem, but still keeping that global view. You see, it sounds very complex because we are going to have to recognize the complexity of the issue, but really we can all take these smaller actions to create this systemic change, if that makes sense. So I think one of the most important things is recognizing that interconnectedness, teaching young people, and young people teaching adults actually as well, going both ways, and maintaining that as well, not having just action on Rainforest Day, but as Indu said, pushing that every day of the year. And once you learn, once you've educated yourself and educated those around you, pushing that message to as many people as possible, and then also implementing concrete action. And the most important thing I would say is never stop conversing and imagining. People say we need action and not words, and that's completely not true. We need to continue speaking. We need to continue the dialogue, because action can't happen without the dialogue, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Bella. Thank you so much, Indu. What a lovely, amazing Sunday. I was going to say morning for me, late afternoon for both of you. One in the UK, one in France, and I'm sitting in Texas. And let's go both collaborate and then individually do what we have to. And Indu, something we say is every day is World Rainforest Day, because that is the only way we're going to go get where we want to, so that we can sit together in 2030 and celebrate what we've done together and where we've brought the world together. When we have healthy forests, when we have thriving forests, everything else has happened in parallel as well. And that's a wonderful place to be at. I want to thank you so much, Indu and Bella and everybody else who's going to be watching on whatever live streams and other places as well. A very, very happy World Rainforest Day. There's a lot we can do together to completely change the trajectory and our joint destiny as one humanity and one planet. Thank you, everybody.